It is Thanksgiving, and therefore I would like to spend the time in this video focusing on what Thanksgiving really is about.
Fighting. That's right, guys. Today we are talking the greatest horse debate. Barefoot versus shod for your horses. I have not wanted to talk about this. I do not want to talk about this, but a lot of people have asked. So it is my due diligence to educate. And that means that I am giving my unbiased opinion of the various sides of this argument, which means no one can get mad at me and nobody can yell at me. That means if any yelling occurs in the comments, I will rip this thing so fast like a Slipknot poster in a Christian youth center, all right? I will take it down. I wanted to do a whiteboard because I see other TikTokers doing it. And I think it looks really nice and professional. Unfortunately, the only whiteboard in my house is this ratty old calendar with a stained-in picture of Baby Yoda, Grogu, onto the calendar. So this is what we got, and this is what we're working with. Some background on terms. Shod just means a horse that wears shoes, right? Blacksmiths, farriers are the people that put shoes onto horses, and that's been since forever ago, right? Since the beginning. We were like, we gotta put shoes on these guys because the world's a rough and tumble kind of place. Barefoot thusly means a horse that does not wear metal shoes. And this is, quite frankly, the battle of the century. The crux of the debate is, do horses really need to be wearing shoes, or is it archaic and damaging, and should we be transitioning every horse to a barefoot lifestyle because that's what they were born with and that's what nature gave them? The flip side of that argument being, well, we invented horseshoes for a reason because horses do things on like rocky trails and things that they probably wouldn't do out in the wild. Therefore, we need to create things to protect their feet when they're doing stuff that is outside of what they might naturally be doing. So we're going to go through some pros and we're going to go through some cons on both sides. Barefoot, first thing you got going for it, natural. It's easy. It's easy peasy. They were born like this. You don't have to do any extra work. Natural, AKA cheaper. Cheaper. However, horseshoes exist for a reason, right? They can be protective for your horse's foot if they are doing things like working on the road, working in rocky trails, doing cross country. Remember I talked about the studs that you screw in to the horseshoe? If you don't have a horseshoe, you can't screw a stud in. So when it's really muddy and your horse is barefoot out on cross country, you are relying on your horse's bare feet to get you around. The counter argument to that many people make is horses can actually feel better without shoes, right? I guess that makes sense. I can feel the ground better when my shoes aren't on. Therefore, a horse could conceivably go cross country if they are comfortable enough being barefoot and do just as well as a horse that is shod and has studs because they can feel the ground better. What a lot of barefoot people argue about shoeing is that it's just a cover-up for hoof issues. If your horse is actually lame, you can get away with a lot of things by just slapping some pads, which are just like usually leather pieces that you put on and then put the shoe on top of it so that your horse's sole doesn't really feel anything. You can hide a lot of issues, deep lying, perhaps neurological issues, under the guise of shoeing. However, some people argue that horses that are barefoot, that are lame, might just have thin soles, is what we call them, right? Thoroughbreds are prone to having them, right? Where they're just really, really, really sensitive on the bottom of their hoof. And no amount of barefoot training, if you will, just allowing the horse to be barefoot for a period of time, is going to get them over that. You're actually just hurting your horse in the process and making them sort of suffer through this thing under the guise that you are making them feel better. The clap back to that is, well, if you were doing it properly and had a proper farrier that could properly, get your horse sound, right, and get your horse's feet comfortable without shoes, then there's no reason why they can't adapt to not having shoes. They were born without shoes, right? They should be able to live without having shoes. To which the shod group will say, well, there's some horses with neurological problems like navicular, which is a syndrome where the navicular bone starts to kind of turn in. It's really painful for horses, but you can do specific shoeing with wedges to help take pressure off the navicular bone and allow a horse that might not do well with navicular syndrome to at least be pasture sound, if not sometimes riding sound. To which the barefoot people say, well, that navicular is a result of bad shoeing. If you hadn't done the bad shoeing to begin with, the horse wouldn't have developed navicular and the horse could be barefoot and be comfortable. And the shod people say, well, yes, navicular can be caused by bad shoeing, but sometimes it's just a thing that happens. A horse just develops navicular syndrome, and it is your duty when they start to do that to take measures, even if they are unnatural, to protect them and make them feel good. To which barefoot people say, well, actually, you can still balance the hoof without shoes, even if the horse has navicular syndrome or hoof issues, and they can still be comfortable without shoes. And if the horse does need an extra level of protection, there are many products out there. There's Cavallo air boots, there's scoot boots that are basically little sneakers that you put on your horse that gives them just a little bit of extra protection. So the barefoot people argue if your horse is really that sensitive or suffering that much, you can take measures that are not permanent and don't involve nailing a shoe onto a horse. I probably should have explained the process of putting shoes on your horse, right? So the shoe is fit to your horse, right? Sometimes the person makes the horseshoes by hand. People rarely do that anymore. They just buy like certain sizes, right? Puts them up against your horse's hoof, sees how they fit, hammers it into place on their anvil, comes back and then takes nails, 6 to 8 nails, to secure that. They're hammering through the hoof, which the hoof is like our fingernail, right? They do not feel anything in that hoof wall, all right? So you hammer that in to keep the shoe in place. Now, obviously, what you're thinking is, there's a hole in the hoof now. You're correct. There is a hole in the hoof now, and so you have to be aware of that. You have to keep that hoof healthy so that it doesn't begin to chip and fall away at that nail hole. You have to get a very good farrier who knows what they are doing and doesn't do what we call hot nailing, which is sometimes you might nail and you might go in too deep and hit them in a spot in their hoof that they can actually feel. That can cause lameness, swelling, abscesses, heat, a whole bunch of problems that take forever to fix. And it's obviously extremely uncomfortable for the horse to have a nail in the part of their hoof, right? It's like if somebody said, hey, I'm gonna nail the front of your nail here, and you're like, okay, fine. And then they accidentally got that little bit like back here, and you'd be like, ow, no thanks. However, all horses, whether they're barefoot or shod, need to get trimmed. And I have seen some barefoot farriers trim a horse way too close. And by that I mean, there's a point, sort of like when you're cutting your dog's nails, there's a quick, right? And you have to be careful about that. There's a point in the horse that you're gonna get there. And if you trim too short, I don't care how balanced that hoof is, if you trim too short, that horse is going to be uncomfortable and that horse is going to be lame. You also have to consider, like when I go cross country, I bring extra shoes to a show, because if Superman loses a shoe out on cross country, I need to be able to replace it. Also, when you're out on cross country and you lose a shoe, you make the executive decision as a rider, can I continue on or do I need to pull up for the safety and comfort of my horse? That's something you would not have to consider if you have a barefoot horse, right? There's nothing, ideally, that can fall off. So what's the answer, guys? Well, you're not gonna like it. It's what I say on this channel all the time. It's a gray area. There is no one right answer for a horse. For the record, I have done both. I have had my horses be all around barefoot, and I have had my horses be all around shod. And let me tell you, the benefits and the pros and cons of each side are literally equal. I've run cross country on a barefoot horse, and I was fine. Was it a little bit slippery and a little bit scary at points? Yeah, it was. Would I obviously prefer at the upper levels to put some studs in there to give my horse some grip when he's jumping 3-3 with a maxed out 4-foot wide table? Yeah, probably. Probably just me personally, I would. But I'm also spoiled because I have one of the best farriers ever. He knows exactly what he's doing. He talks to vets, he looks at x-rays, he's excellent. Also, in the amount of work some of us are doing, it can be really, really hard on a barefoot horse with the amount of training that we do. So sorry guys, it's just personal preference of the horse. You have to listen to the horse. What does the horse want? So don't scream to each other about it. Ask your horse. He'll tell you. I mean, not with words, but like be intuitive. It's a horse.